Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Robert.
We'll let folks filter in for just a moment, but this is the first time we've all been in the same room together. How exciting
It is.
And to discuss a very expensive stack of comic books sitting in front of us, no less. I'm Robert Wolonsky, the Communications Director here at Heritage Auctions, and I'm incredibly excited to welcome everybody here to our discussion today of the Promise Collection, which begins its trek to the auction block on the 18th of June at 11 Central here at Heritage Auctions. It's about 5,000 comic books, if I'm not mistaken. This is obviously just a handful. There are some in New York, and there are many more being graded. This has obviously been an extraordinary undertaking. To my left, Ed Jasper, Senior Vice President here at Heritage Auctions. Between us, Lon Allen, Vice President here at Heritage Auctions. And we're going to discuss for the next hour the Promise Collection. There are a lot of people who have joined us online. I've got my computer in front of us to take questions from those who may have questions of these two gentlemen. I don't imagine you have any for me, so feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. But gentlemen, let's begin this discussion on the Promise Collection. When did you guys find out that this existed, and talk to us about where it came from?
Ryan, you want to take that? Sure.
And I'll say this, and I ask this obviously just for folks watching, knowing that the consignor has asked to remain anonymous, but there is an incredible story that we can tell. So what we can say of it, let's do that.
Sure. Yeah, it was the beginning of this year. Maybe it was January, February. First got contacted by the family, and they sort of knew what they had. There was a list, so that got us very excited. But them being complete amateurs, they really didn't know exactly what they had. They didn't know about the condition or anything, but just based on the list, Ed and I knew it was going to be a very exciting collection. So we arranged as fast as we could to jump on a plane and go look at it.
So what did they tell you about what it was, where it came from, and where had it been?
Sure. Well, what they told us originally were that the books had been in an attic for a long time, and that they had come out of an attic maybe 20 years ago and been cataloged and back boarded. So, again, they didn't really know about the condition. We didn't really know about the condition. Sometimes an attic is not exactly the best place, but luckily this was, in a pretty cold climate, and, they were so well preserved. That was, one of the first things that Ed and I noticed when we got there, that we were just totally floored by it.
So Ed, talk about where it came from, the backstory in terms of who collected these comics. Obviously, we're not giving names, but there is an extraordinary story. There is a reason we call it the Promise Collection.
Yeah. Just a couple of add-on thoughts on what Lon was saying. The family was actually pretty apologetic because they thought the condition was at the 2 to 4 scale and not the 9 to 9.8 scale that it turned out to be. It was very dramatic, revealing to them really how important and how wonderful this collection was. And the basic backstory is there was 2 brothers. The older brother was drafted into the Korean War. And from what we've learned subsequently was the younger brother actually was much bigger than his older brother and was always his kind of protector.
Physically bigger.
Physically bigger. So he enlisted into the Korean War to kind of keep an eye on his brother. But he had one request, that if anything should happen to me, you'll take care of my funny books. So sadly, the younger brother passed away, was killed in battle. And through the years, the older brother, who had no idea about collectibles, and
he didn't collect comics himself.
He didn't collect anything.
Yeah.
He didn't collect anything that we know of. Certainly not that would be heritage material. But he did keep his promise, and what the family told us is many times over the years, a family member would say, get rid of this junk. It's cluttered, and repeatedly he'd just say, no, I can't do it to him. I can't do it to him. So about a year ago, the older brother passed away, and about the same time, or previous to, just before that, we had sold Batman #1 for $2.2 million. So that rung a lot of bells in their minds, and that gave them the impetus to contact us.
So when you go to where they are, and when you understand the condition may not be great, they may be 2 to 4s, what was your initial reaction to seeing these books in the boxes and the boards and the bags and the condition that they were? What did you think to yourself? Because as we've discussed, this turned out to be one of the major, probably the most major discovery of the last 25 years.
Well, it kind of started out, there was a gap in the collection. So, for example, there was Superman 1 or Captain America 1 until the end of the run, number 75. It was kind of like that for some of the titles, but there was this big gap from about 1940 to about 1945. And they did find 2 additional boxes. And in there, that filled some of the gaps of these 1940 to 1945 books. So right off the bat, we kind of dug into those because those weren't bagged or boarded. And there was some of the, if I could see that pile here.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
Let me-
I
got one.
And let me just
Yeah.
say this. So
Yeah.
the books that you're going to hold up here are books that we actually have not put online yet. These are
Correct.
books that are not in the sale on the 18th. This is breaking news as it goes, in as much as that these are books that we have not yet made known as being from the Promise Collection.
So when we looked at the master list, I think the earliest Detective Comics was about number 80.
Yeah.
But so in that box, we found Detective 58 in a 7.5. That's the first Penguin. And then we found Detective 66 in a 7.5. That's the first Two-Face. And then Detective 62 and an 8.0, which is, some would call it the first Joker cover. And this Detective Comics 71, which is one of the classic Joker covers. So those 2 boxes we just dug into. I had one box and Lana had one box, and we were going like, oh, beep,
Yeah.
oh, beep. And I'd be like, wow.
Oh my. Because yeah, what they showed us at first was like the Captain America 1 and the Batman 1, and those aren't super high grade. They're from the very earliest part of the collection,
Right.
and that's what they had looked at, and they had kind of judged the rest of the collection was going to look like. But then when we started seeing some more of these books, and then things like this from the little bit later period, and then I mean within 10 minutes, Ed and I are saying, pedigree.
Yeah.
I think this might be a pedigree, and then within an hour, it was, this is a pedigree.
Well,
This is absolutely, no doubt, slam dunk, home run pedigree material.
So they have these 2 boxes of books that they had just discovered in the week or so between our initial contact and our visit. So we knew that was something special. Then they had 27 long boxes. A long box holds about 200 Golden Age comic books. They had those lined up around the floor. So Lon continued to go through the fresh find, and I started rooting around on the floor, and it was just like, Lon,
Come here. Look
come
at
here,
this.
come here.
Take
you
this
know.
one out.
And
Is
then
this
there's
as nice as I think it is?
9.6 on this book. Not only is this the highest graded, but a 4.0 copy will sell for $1,000 or more. And it was just book after book after book like that.
And the page quality, we're opening them
And if I can see that,
up,
Marvel, yeah.
and we're seeing like, wow, these are.
So when we dug into the long boxes, we were finding this is a 9.8 on a 10 scale. So this is about as perfect as you could hope for. But there was just thousands of books in this condition. Unread, white pages, perfect color. I mean, it just,
Because the consignor, the brother, he actually bought them off the stand to collect them, correct? He did not necessarily buy.
no, not necessarily. He bought them to read them.
Yeah.
Well, then what we see, what seems like happens a lot of times with collectors is you're buying them to read them, and then you're buying more, and then you kind of, it does seem like the guys then kind of do start collecting them,
Right.
because then we do sort of wonder, like, once you get to maybe 1946 or 1947, they do seem to be unread. they're just,
Right.
it doesn't seem like it's possible that anybody ever opened.
Right, that's my question. How do they
Yeah.
maintain this condition for this long? I mean, even obviously they were well stored, but that said, somebody who buys them to read them when they're young, they're going to get thumbed through. They're going to get
Well,
creased.
you do notice, okay, so the collection starts roughly in 1940. So the collector would have been about 10. So, the books he bought when he was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, some are really nice, but above average, but not very much above average. But then as you get to about 1944, when he would have been about 14 to the time to up till 1950, that's when they seem to be unread. From what we've learned from the family, but he was very particular. He would not let anybody else touch his books. And I think even at the time, well, it's evident that he kept them, he prized them. These were prized. So while he wasn't collecting per se, he might have been more of an accumulator, but he loved the comics so much that he kept them in pristine condition. And, mostly kids, especially that era, they'd have brothers and sisters, they'd have next door neighbors, they'd pass them around and, the covers get torn off and pages are missing and they're soiled and there's soda pop stains on the interior. And that's typical, but these are very much atypical.
But what fascinates me most about this collection is the diversity of it. It's, when I collected detective, or I collected action, I collected Justice League. I was a DC guy. Obviously, I had some Marvel. Or I collected superhero stuff. This runs the gamut from Batman, Human Torch, Marvel, to the really esoteric books as well. Did that surprise you, the extraordinary breadth of the collection?
It is unusual.
Yeah. And one thing that another thing that is unusual too is there isn't much of kind of the funny stuff, the humor stuff, or the cartoon stuff. He seemed to like the serious stuff more, the action, adventure, superhero. So that's even helped like front load the value of this even more, because there's really not that many comics in here that are kind of fall into that cheaper range. They're all like exactly what you want.
Several people have asked, and I'll just go ahead and ask now while we're doing this. From what era are these? 1940 is when they begin. When does this end? Several people have asked, are there books from 1950?
Yes.
1950s is the
I think
last.
the latest cover date that is in my mind is something like February 51. However, February 51 from a date standpoint on the comic,
Right.
They're on the stands 3 to 5 months before that date.
So it would have been late 1950 when the book was actually published and on the stands.
So in a way,
is the
yeah.
end.
Right.
So if you see January 1943, that means that that's the shelf life. So December 31st, 1942, you couldn't buy this book anymore.
Right. Somebody asked if there are strange adventures from 1950.
Oh, I think there's a few.
Yeah,
There's one and maybe up to maybe number 10 or maybe not even that high, but there's a few. But it doesn't go very long.
Well, there you go. That's a question that has been asked and answered, and I'm sure those will be in upcoming auctions. How long do we expect the Promise collection to be auctioned through?
Through next year, through 2022. Probably not beyond that, and maybe not to the very end of 2022. But all of this year and the majority next year.
Excellent. Someone asked, will an entire catalog of the Promise collection eventually be published? Obviously, we have the catalog here for the June auction, which is an extraordinary collection with a remarkable essay at the front of it, if I say so.
It's a good question. We have several people have asked me that as well. We love to do it. I just don't know how it's feasible. Considering you see how thick this is,
Right?
And this is 275 comic books or whatever. And if we're talking 5,000, it would be a tome. It would be a 1,500 page tome that I'm not sure. It might be worth looking into if we have enough requests. I just don't know how feasible it would be.
And there's a flip side to that. in a sense, the Heritage Permanent Auction Archive. So you could look Promise Collection as a keyword 10 years from now, and every single book with every single description will be readily available with a very simple search.
But that said, it's nice to have one of these.
Yeah, it's cool.
Absolutely.
A lot of questions are now coming in. We'll get to some of the books here in a moment. But I guess to begin the discussion of the comics themselves, what are some of the keys included in the collection? If you want to discuss some of the ones that are in this particular auction, but how would you? What keys are included thus far that you can rattle off the top of your head, or maybe sitting in front of us?
Well, I think some of the top books, there's a Detective 140 and 96, and that's on display in our New York offices right now. But that's the first Riddler. That book is probably in the 150. Well, it's already, I think, bidding up to 162,000.
Right.
So personally, my target on that was 150.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've exceeded that. There's a Phantom Lady 17, which is probably the most famous Good Girl cover of all time. That's in a 9.6, a 9.
Sole highest graded.
Sole highest graded, and a 9.4 sold in 2019 for 122,000.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then we have some of the great classic covers. You know, here's All Star 33, which is a classic Solomon Grundy cover. And this is the first appearance of Solomon Grundy. And this book is exceedingly rare. And as you can see, it's just got this classic horror type cover. And this is a 6-figure book. Right here is the first Superboy. More Fun 101 and 9.4. Again, a perfect near mint score. Lon, you want to talk about some of the other
Well, and you
stuff?
got some of the, there you got the All Select one, again, tough, timelies. I mean, that's the other thing about this collection that's so amazing is we see so many, great collections that come out that have, it's hard to get it's hard not to get the glare on there, isn't it?
It's okay.
You see the DCs and you see faucets, and I mean, they're great and they're collectible and everybody loves them, but for the timelies, this is probably the most timelies that I've seen in a collection in, I don't know, ever. Maybe.
I think there's over 200 high grade timelies. And
Yeah.
if you've got a collection of Golden Age books, let's say 500 books is a typical collection. If there's a dozen and a half timelies in there, that's great.
Yeah, you're doing jumping jacks, So you got like this classic, you got the Hitler cover, Captain America pulling Hitler out. So, this is a super highly prized book. This one, I wouldn't be surprised if this one flirts with 6 figures. And then just to see these 9.8 whites, it's just mind blowing that like not only are these the sole highest graded, but a lot of these, there's no 9.6, there's no 9.4, there's no 9.2. Like they're the sole highest graded by several notches.
I would say something close to 3/4 of the books in this collection will hold up as the single highest graded copy known to exist.
I have to say, I'm sorry we don't have this one in front of us. I know it's in New York, but this was a comic I didn't even know existed.
Well, it's very rare. It's right at the end of the run. It got canceled right after that. So it wasn't selling too well. They're obviously converting over to like horror themed books, superhero stuff. Yeah, see, it only went that one more issue and then that was it. So that was the other thing, like, with the Contact comics, the LB Cole covers, these classic covers that, like Ed said, these things, can be thousands of dollars in low grade. And, to see high grade copies, I mean, some of these I just had kind of figured like they just don't exist. There isn't one.
Well, let's talk about that mask you're looking at right here. Let's talk about this one because that is just an extraordinary work. I know it's obviously one of the rare books, certainly in that condition. When you saw that, and I mean, obviously every book you pulled out was an OS moment, but when you saw that, what was your reaction?
OS.
Oh yeah. Well, I have to say, I mean, that's one, then once we got them back to the office, And we started going through them carefully here. That was the other great thing about this collection is most things you find problems. You go, oh, well, I was hoping it was this, but it wasn't quite. Almost every single book in this collection, you go, oh, well, it's better than I thought. I'm waiting for something to be wrong with it. So I could tell you on that one in particular, that was one I ended up walking around the office and showing to all of the guys, that specific one, saying, look at this. This is going to be the sole highest graded copy. Can you believe it? So that one I did get even more excited about than a lot of the others.
On that book in particular, I think something like a 3.5 copy sold for $25,000 or something.
Something like that.
Something like that. And we had one that was a 1, and somebody took a piece of paper and glued what was left of the cover onto the piece of paper. And it looks like somebody put it in a blender and tried to put that together. And that's all for $10,000. So this is, and this is also one of the hottest sectors of the market, what used to be called esoteric books. So things that just have salacious kind of good girl covers, or horror themed books, or, the devil, or those kind of themes. They're not mainstream superhero, but the ascendancy in price over the last 5 or 10 years has just been incredible. If you look at our auction archives for a Mask #2 in circa 2003, maybe that book is $2,500. But in today's market, maybe it's $35,000.
Yeah.
Well, see, it's interesting. Somebody asked, would you estimate the total value of this pedigree collection? I know we've said about 10 million, but I assume obviously every book here is worth what 2 people will pay for it. So, I assume that that's a conservative estimate.
Yeah, I don't know that we've tried to even come up with a number better than that. I think it's going to be north of 10, but
I can tell you this, when I did the first pass, and this is the first 20 minutes, half hour, the number 10 million popped in my head. And then I kind of backed off because, whoa, $10 million, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, when you even think the average, you start to go like, well, what's the average?
Yeah, and I'm like, it can't be that. And I think we were backing it off, and we just tried to extrapolate. Like, this box is worth $1 million, and that run's worth $1 million, and that leaves you 4,500 books. So if each book is $1,000, so it's 4.5. So maybe it's 5 or 6 million. But then when we got these home and really started pouring through them, it's like,
yeah,
10 million was kind of right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking about when you sent it to CGC to get them, because they were not graded, obviously, they were just collected. So when you sent it to CGC, what was their response? What kind of discussions do you have with them? Is it easy to create a collection, to create a pedigree?
No. Oh no, it's really, really difficult. The thing is,
I love the disdain you have for my questions. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well,
it's the most edge-aster response I've ever gotten to a question.
Well, when Ed and I have been responsible, we've found quite a few pedigrees already, so we kind of, that was one of the first things Ed did, was he called up the guys at CGC, and we started, just explaining it to them. So even over the phone, they kind of said like, well, we know you guys, we trust you guys. If it's half of what you say, it sounds like a pedigree to us. But go ahead.
When I was talking to him, I'm like, do you need to get on a plane? Should we fly down the top 100 books? Like, no, that's not necessary, and it's still bearing out. And we get books back we'd like to be seeing them come back sooner, but we've just inundated the grading company, and they're busy as heck anyway. But so at this point, maybe we have the grades for going on 1,000 books, and it's holding form. There's an occasional 8.0, but there's many more 9.8s than there is 8.0s. And I don't expect that trend to stop.
No.
Like I said, 75% of these books will be the sole highest graded.
I think so.
Eric asks in the Q&A, how will this rank in pedigree discoveries in your times as a collector?
Well, I keep using 25 years because that's about 25 or 30 years ago, the Pacific Coast collection came out. And that was a Silver Age collection. So roughly 1960 to 1970. But that collection was so big, and the average book was probably a 9.4. And it had every single major key and all the major keys. Many of them are the sole highest graded to this day. As far as Golden Age, I don't think another Golden Age collection has come out. This is probably the best Golden Age collection since the Mile High.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big caveat because like Lon found the Billy Wright collection 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then there's the Pennsylvania collection and especially the Allentown collection. But they were small, compact offerings of books that had books in the $250,000 and up range.
Yeah, because the Billy Wright collection was only like 375 books, but they were all early keys, action one, Captain America one, Batman one, Detective 27. So I mean, the value had this huge per book value, but it wasn't even 10% as big as this collection. So it's kind of apples to oranges. But yeah, I mean, this probably is the best Golden Age collection that has surfaced since you and I have been doing this.
Or before.
Yeah, maybe since the Mile High, and that's been
1978.
Yeah.
I was 10. Ryan asked, is there a pattern you're choosing as far as which books get graded and put in auction? Is there some kind of order? Or is it just whichever books we get back from CGC first?
It's a mix. I think obviously this first run, we had the pick of the whole collection. But Lon and I are intentionally trying to meter this out so that round 2 is not 50% of the value and round 3, 20% of the value of the first round. So we intend to have very important books in every signature auction from here until at least the midpoint of 2022.
Somebody asked, so you've raised a good point. Are they going to be only in signatures? Will they be in weeklies?
No, every venue available to us, I'm already assigning stuff to weekly sales.
Yeah. So they'll start in the weekly sales in 6 or 8 weeks, maybe.
Yeah,
just
July.
a few, just because we haven't gotten that many back from CGC. But yeah, they're definitely going to be stuff in the weekly sales, and yeah, we may even do like a monthly sale of only these books of a few hundred.
Yeah, like we might do a thematic sale like crime books, and we'll have a monthly sale that features 250 books that are on a crime theme.
That answers Joe's question, which is how many auctions are planned. We don't really know yet.
Right.
Well, there's 5,000 books, so yeah, over 18 months, that roughly we have to sell 300 books a month.
Right. William asks, are there early St. John books included? The distribution was very spotty in many parts of the country.
A few. There's a few Matt Baker, like Diary Secrets, but a handful. There's not strong on St. John, but no collection is.
Going back to the origin, somebody asks, can we tell what state they were in? We're really not even doing that. It was clearly in a cooler climate.
Yes.
Do we know where they bought the books? It was off the newsstand. We don't know specific locations. So I think, again, we're respecting the consignor's privacy.
Yeah.
So, which has been difficult, I know, for all of us, because obviously if we could have a consignor out there, it would be.
Well, let me go to bat for the consignor.
Yeah.
This is not. They're not trying to be obtuse. They're not trying to.
Sure.
It's just a lot of winner doesn't want their name and address published. Okay. So I can assure you, they're being very diligent about making sure that they're following every tax law and everything in that kind of respect. It's more that the collecting community,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who want to try and solve a mystery. There's a lot of speculation and this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And it's a family decision, and just they don't want pressure being brought to bear who's somebody who might be a little bit more vulnerable. They don't want to get a knock on their door.
Yeah.
They don't want to get a
They don't want to get
crowbar.
hundreds of phone calls.
They don't want to get a crowbar to a storage locker, you know, and those things aren't unrealistic.
Sure. Especially with something as extraordinary as this. How do you believe, somebody asked, how do you believe this pedigree will affect the current market trend? You obviously talked about the fact that in a previous market, a book did X. In this market, a book could do triple X. Who knows how it will do? What impact will the Promise collection have on the market?
Well, one of Ed's old, things that he has always said for years is a rising tide lifts all ships. And I mean, I think that's accurate with this. The whole market's up anyway, by a lot. And I think this is just going to bring, new people, to the table. More and more people are going to be interested. And, people might, buy these and sell their undercopies, and some more things are going to become available. But that's what we've noticed over the years, just the more material that's available to purchase, almost helps the prices.
Right.
Just more people get involved, because sometimes the rarity almost works against you. If you don't think it exists, you don't think you're ever going to be able to get a copy, you move on to something else. But when they're out there, things kind of get stirred up, people get interested, and I mean, I think it's just going to be a boon to everything.
I agree.
A couple of people have asked about authentication, which is obviously, that's what this is. That's
Yeah.
what this slab is. That's how they're authenticated. You send it to CGC, they tell you that's what it is.
Right.
That's the real deal, and that's the grade.
Exactly.
So,
Well, a couple other things on that point. I think Heritage is very transparent, and Heritage is about as trustworthy a source as any auction house or dealer has ever been. So again, going back to the permanent auction archives, if you bought this book, you can link right to the listing for that, and there should be no question. Additionally, we do plan to create certificates for the books that won't be CGC graded.
which ones will not, and why not?
Well, there's a lot of runs. Not everything's timed. There's a lot of Westerns. There's a lot of not a lot of strip reprint books, but a few.
Yeah.
So there's a title called Famous Funnies. And maybe the top guide value on these is $100. Well, the CGC process, grade and press if necessary, would cost something like $60. And plus, it gets buried in the system for about a year. It might take a year for those to come back from CGC. So for us to put $60 of our consignor's money and tie it up for a year in a book, that we're very skeptical that that's going to bring enough of a premium to justify those fees and that time constraint. Because the Famous Funny with the $100 guide value, if Lon or I graded say 9.4 and it's from the Promise collection, it'll probably be $200. If it was CGC graded and they graded it at 9.6, it's probably going to bring about $200. Right?
So the ROI ain't there.
Right. So
Yes.
there's not going to be tons like that. Percentage wise, this is probably going to be the highest percentage wise collection that gets
Right.
graded. But there are going to be things like that of just lower demand, lower value things that we will, start selling raw in, a few months from now, maybe.
George asked, for the upcoming auction, you have only 4 action and 2 Supermans. I assume there are more actions and Supermans to come. Any earlier Superman issues than the 26th that's going to be auctioned in June?
There are more. I think they go a little bit earlier than that, Superman, but not a lot earlier. And the actions, there are not any early ones.
I think you're right.
Yeah, there's no like under number 50, and maybe they don't even go
I
that.
think the lowest Superman might be something like 10.
Yeah, I think there are. Yeah, but there's no like. Yeah, there's
The
no real
26
early numbers.
26 was the earliest one that stood out.
That was like minty mint.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they're definitely a lot more. But I think the action run is more 1945 to 1950 50.
Most of the titles start about 44 or 45. So the first All-American is something, well,
Well, I think the
61.
61 is the first one. Yeah.
But the second one we had graded was 77. It's kind of the same thing with the actions. The actions kind of started in earnest about number 80. And
think
that's
we
like
kind of
that.
think, I mean, it's sort of
recent
conjecture, but
Right.
I think by the time he was 15 or 16, he probably had a job, he had a lot more money to spend. And so he'd start buying, a lot more titles when he was young, early 1940s. You can only, even though a dime was a lot of money back then, you'd only buy so many. So all of a sudden you see in that time period, we just starts buying a lot more.
Right.
Yeah, there was something too that I think is another miraculous aspect of this collection. We're talking about the Captain America 74. Well, in World War II, Captain America was as good a selling title as any. But by 1940, what is that, 49? Cap 74?
I think so, right? Yeah.
All these superheroes fade out with very few exceptions. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, they're the only heroes that go from 1940 to present day. So they all stop in that early atomic age.
Right.
So books from 1946 to 1950 are the rarest. And that's the vast majority of the 96, 98 books.
Yeah, and the fact that he kept buying all of those titles, he bought Submariner right up to the end, and Torch, and he bought all of those timelies up till the very last issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'll screw up the math, but the consignor, our primary contact and I were doing the math, and it was something like he was buying 2 comic books a day, 365 days a year for about 6 years.
So I've been wondering too of how he even bought them and got them home in this condition. Because a lot of these, they weren't a 9.8 on the newsstand.
Right.
And the fact that, did he go out of his way to pick the very best one? Did he have some kind of a box that he put them in to get them home? I mean, that is the other part of it that's miraculous to me. You could go to a comic book shop right now, half of the stuff sitting in the comic book shop is not a 9.8 that was just printed a week ago.
As I discovered over my childhood.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is the Phantom Lady that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That we don't have in-house.
Yeah,
it's in New York.
It's at the New York office. Yeah, that'll definitely be one of the top lots.
Somebody says that they see a CBCS slab here. I don't
No.
know. Dave, I'm sorry, there is no CBCS slab here. But to the point of detective work, so a couple of people have asked, some of the books have the K on them,
Yeah.
or fractions on them. And I don't know if do we know what those were meant to represent?
Not exactly, but those are arrival codes.
Yeah.
So back in the day, a well-stocked newsstand might buy books from a half a dozen distributors.
Okay.
So at the end, so in January 1st, 1944, if this hadn't sold, you could return it to the distributor.
Yeah.
So basically the
So-
distributor wanted to know that he was buying his own books.
Right.
back.
So you see that. So for example, there on the K. So the distributor that sold them this book, their name probably
Right.
started with a K. And the 1/26, that's a date, January 26th. So either they got it on that date, or more likely what it was, since this is a March cover date,
Mhm.
as we were saying, they came out well in advance.
Right.
1/26 is probably when they were going to take it off of the stands. So
That
then,
makes sense.
and then what they would do is they would just rip this part off, the title strip, and they'd throw the rest of the book away, and they'd return this, and they'd get whatever it was they paid for them, probably 5 cents. They probably paid 5 cents for
Right.
it, sold it for 10, they'd get their nickel back. But then that way they knew who to return it to. So like this one's just got the K. But you'll see and it depends on, again, the distributor. So this company obviously distributed DCs and timelies. You'll see on a lot of them, there'll be a C,
Mhm.
like on the, oh no, the Catman's also the K. But I think here on the Phantom Lady,
Right.
we don't have, but so you got the C. So that would have been from a different distributor that their name probably started with a C, or that was the code. So you see it a lot. In the golden age. By the time the 60s books, you rarely see it. Once in a while you'll see
Right.
a stamp, but it's very common on
Or they
golden age.
overspray the books.
Yeah.
They would take like a spray paint And the bundle, they just spray paint the top of the books on the bundle. So they knew if it was magenta, then this was that distributor.
Yeah.
A lot of people speculate, is there a chance the brother bought them from a store that set aside copies for him? Therefore, that may explain the condition that they, hey, he didn't
Very
just like grab them
Very,
off.
very possible. We've wondered that too. Definitely possible.
Somebody asked, 9.8 is an incredible grade, obviously, for Golden Age. Has any book thus far graded higher from the Promise collection?
No, we haven't gotten any 9.9s yet.
Would you expect any?
Well, kinda.
Yeah.
We've been kind of thinking like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few, but it's so hard to get. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah, a 9.9, Jim Halpern explained it this way. A 9.9 is like flipping a coin and having it land on its edge. So that's how rare 9.9s and 10s are. The oldest 10 is in this current auction. It's not from this collection, but it's I think
a
a
Thor.
Thor from
Yeah.
1967 or 68. So
Yeah.
that's the oldest 10.
Thor 156.
Yes,
Are there duplicates?
yes, but very few.
Do we know about how
Are
many?
there? I haven't even seen one duplicate yet.
I've run across a half a dozen.
Oh, have you? Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen one yet.
That seems to be a very popular question. I assume folks are hoping that they will get their chance. There's the great Joker double cover and the black cover. Are there more double covers coming, or is that the only one that was known in the collection?
No, we found quite a few.
Do we have that here, or is that in New
That's, I
York?
think, in New York
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
What, maybe we found as many as 10?
I've found 2 or 3, and since like you found,
I
Eight.
found 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah. So there's
That's this one.
yeah.
Which one? This one.
And we are still going through them. I mean, there are still a lot of books that Ed and I haven't looked at yet, but I'd say we found 10, maybe 10 double covers. Nothing as mind-blowing as that one. It's funny because that's the very first double cover we ran across, and it's going to be by far the most expensive. The other ones that I've found are, I think I found a Jungle and, a few things that are super
Star
expensive.
Spangled, and
Yeah.
but we did find a look. Lon was processing the cap run and found a cap 8.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Captain America number 8 is a double cover.
What do you consider, JR asked, what do you each consider to be the rarest of the copies within the Gerber classifications?
I don't know. Really, I'm not a big student of that. However, well, in terms of condition, these are all 7 or 8s on a 10 scale.
Right.
And then just finding a copy, things like these small publishers or the masks are exceedingly rare.
Yeah.
These are a lot of times, these are considered Continental comics, because Continental was one of the publishers of the classic LB Kroll covers of this period. The Continental, Rural Home, but in general, they're kind of referred to as Continental comics.
And I mean, Gerber did a really good job for back then. I mean, his stuff has proven to be fairly accurate. I mean, if he said it was really rare, it's probably really rare. But yeah, as far as what's the rarest one in here, it's probably some romance book or probably some, some end of the run. I mean, there's a lot of things in here that I just go, I've never seen this before. Like when, Timely changed to Marvel, changed to Atlas, and there'll be these crime books that change title every 3 issues. And there's not only is this going to be the highest graded one, there isn't one grade.
Right.
So, I mean, it could be something like that where you just go, I've never seen this before.
When I'm processing these books, I'll have GP analysis open. What does GP analysis stand for? Like
Graded price.
Graded price. Yeah. So it's a website that tracks the sales of all graded comic books, and it's probably the best source for that. So I need to know when I send this to CGC, is this in the $400 class, $1,000 class, $3,000 class, and on. And when I come to some of these titles, there might be a 20 issue run, but there's only 6 or 7 of those 20 issues that have ever come up for sale.
Yeah.
So Jim Corrigan, the Spectre, thankfully chimes in here. These issues are all Gerber 8s, which means an estimate of 11 to 20. All winners 21, Captain America 74, Captain Flight 5, Catman 29, 4 favorites 26, and Power Comics number 2.
Well, we definitely have All Winners 21, Cap 74.
Power.
We do have Power 2?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, we have the Power 2s in there. Four favorites 26.
We have some 4 favorites, and I think they're from that time
I think
slot.
I think that one's in there. The Catman. And we've got some Captain Flights. I mean, I think those might all be.
Jim Corrigan, again, the Spectre, chimes in and says, these are all current lots of yours.
Oh, well, there you go.
Ah, there you go.
But that said, don't blame these fellas because A, look at them, and B, there's 5,000 comics in the collection.
Right.
And it's not the only auction.
Well, I
They're
said I
not-
thought they might all
they're
be
not-
in there.
They're not the only books being auctioned in this particular auction.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And
And
there's
it's
certain
just-
titles like prize comics. I don't know that anybody has a complete set of prize comics.
Right.
They're just, it's a mainline title, it's a superhero title, but finding prize, and there's a lot of titles like that.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
it's just like, you can't put a run of these together.
Speaking of runs, and again, there's a lot of questions. Is there a run of Marvel mystery comics in this collection?
The earliest I think is 57, and it runs to the end of run 92.
Are there any superhero Centaur books in the collection?
Don't believe so.
I don't think so, because those are all really early. I think Centaur ended in 1941.
Something
They
like
went out
that.
of business in 41.
People
So I don't.
consider those pre-time ones.
Yeah, I don't think there's even one Centaur.
Is the famous Suspense Comics number 3 in the collection? Asks the Spectre.
No. I think 4. The suspense run starts at 4 and goes to the end.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely 5 up for sure. But yeah, there's no.
All right. So, are there any Are there many early ECs from the late 1940s?
Funny you should ask. Very, very few of the horror/crime ones, but the precursors to those, we have almost all those. The
Yeah.
Moon Girls, the International Comics, Crime Patrol. What else is it? International, which becomes International Crime Patrol, which
Yeah.
becomes Crime Patrol.
So there are quite a few of those, but yeah, not the horror ones, but the other, the really early 40s.
There's a couple of
49.
3, and that's like a puzzle to me. Why?
Yeah, I found like one Haunt of Fear, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw found one Vault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that those aren't there.
What's the earliest book in the collection?
I don't know exactly. Batman 1 is what? Spring of 40?
Yeah. When's Wiz one?
I think almost exactly the same time.
Yeah.
Do we
Around
know
that.
Do we know the earliest speed in the auction?
Oh, God.
Not off the top of my head.
Again, keep in mind, for folks asking incredibly specific questions, that there are 5,000 books. There are 4,000 or so at CGC, I believe, right?
There's a couple thousand we haven't gone through.
So,
Yeah.
so this is a,
Yeah. I mean, it's very time.
as Lon
just
noted, this is
looking at every single one. And
this is more than a year-long project.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be done here. There are going to be more Flash comics than are being shown. Wiz Comics is February 40, so yes, that is about the same time as Batman number 1. So Michael asked a couple of really interesting questions. I know these were in attics and boxes, in the attic and boxes. How else were they stored? These high grades are just hard to get in modern books, bagged and boarded. Were they wrapped? Were they raw? And how were they kept?
In stacks.
I think just in stacks.
Really?
Just in stacks.
So speed is 34 through 44.
We're gonna start to wrap it up, but again, there are a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But look, we have
Great.
the books in front of us. If each of you could choose one book from the collection for your personal collection, it doesn't have to be one on the table, but if it is, so be it. What would that book be? And again, keeping in mind you're still going through them, so your answer today may not be the same tomorrow.
Probably the Phantom Lady 17 for me.
Really,
Yeah. I mean, it's always been such a classic. And
it's incredibly iconic.
Yeah, I love that too. I remember, God, about 1993, this collection came out called the Ohio Collection. And it had a lot of books from that really tough time period. And the Phantom Lady 17, me and a guy who became one of my best friends in comics were vying for that one and kind of fighting over it. And the price was $5,000. Now, I don't know what the Ohio copy ended up grading, but 9.4.
I think it might be a 9.4. I think it might be one of the 9.4s.
Yeah, so that's pretty close. I mean, being a timely guy,
Some of those USAs that you never see, those are pretty special.
yeah.
Is there any book that we haven't discussed on the table that and by the way, if anybody wants to know which book I would buy, it'd be this All-Star 33.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I'm a sucker for the JSA.
Yeah.
so.
I don't know. I don't think we looked at this little stack.
I was
But I
gonna say,
can't
Jordan.
remember exactly what's in here. These are just some that I picked up. So the Erie, I mean, tough, or like, oh, well, here's a great, talking about, oh, and here's another. So that's the Phantom Lady. That's the last issue. And I mean, you could kind of make a case for it being almost as good as the 17 and just as rare, more rare, really.
More rare.
And then that might be the highest graded.
I'm
too, I
sure it
think.
is.
Yeah. So there's a couple more that are just, fall into that good girl category that it's just,
And
one
the-
of the hottest segments of the
The
market.
Erie #1 is considered the first full-length horror comic book.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about sort of the process, and let's say they consign their books with us, and did you want to drive these to CGC yourself? How do we get them there? How do we?
On guard.
Somebody asked about that.
Yeah.
And the most expensive one on guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know how we do that if they were, let's say, if they were to do their own. So an armed guard is the way to go. It's better than a registered mail. There are very, very specific questions. And I guess I would say this before we end this. If they have questions for you about this auction or upcoming ones, what's the best way somebody can get a hold of the two of you? Just go ahead and give me your email
Yeah,
address.
they can email us. I'm just Lona, Lona @ha.com.
And I'm Ed J @ha.com.
Are there any books that, as you were looking through this, and several people have asked this, that blew your mind, that you couldn't believe that you came across, whether it's the Mask or whether it's any of these late Captain Americas?
I'll never forget, that first morning with these books. Because I was crawling around on the floor.
You were
looking at
Oh, he
and,
just,
and
I've never
Lon-
seen him so
and
excited.
Lon was answering questions from the consignors and just like,
Yeah. But, and the thing is, Ed and I have been doing this for a long time. We've been at Heritage for a long time. We've seen the best of the best of the best. And just to see him that excited for hours, just, crawling around on his hands and knees, rifling through these books. Lon, come here. Here, take this one out. Is this as nice as I think it is? Oh my gosh, this is going to be the sole highest graded. Remember you did that on the Superboy 1. I remember you going, you ever seen a Superboy 1 like this? Like, just.
and I think the terms like, expression, this is stupid.
Yeah.
This is just stupid.
So,
Yeah,
to
really.
say, the number of times that I've been blown away are just, it's repeatedly. It's almost every day when I go through these. Because again, you just keep thinking, I just keep going, wow. I just keep finding myself going, wow, as I take them out, like, look at this thing. It's perfect. I'm like trying to find something wrong with it, and just book after book after book after book like that of just the colors, and they're flat and perfect and just bright and just, so the me getting blown away, it's like a daily basis.
Based on the reaction, I think we will probably have to do a full Promise Collection book at some point.
Well, we could try to look into it.
Like I said, the permanent auction archive.
Yeah, but that's not the same as
Yeah.
pulling this off the shelf. You comic book collectors like the tangible.
Well, maybe we could
Well-
do it where everything is just a smaller picture size, so it's not,
We'll do it as a
800.
non-fungible token. How's that?
Genius.
There you go. We'll do the entire Promise Collection as one NFT for one lucky winner.
Yeah. And I wanted
That's
to,
not a
I
terrible
just
idea.
wanted to say something. It hasn't come up today, but prior to this, we get a lot of questions about what's next. Our policy, coming from our chief executive that manages the comic department, to me and Lana, or two of the senior guys. We want to be as transparent as possible. Even though it might be counterintuitive, we think it's much better to give people as much information as possible. So in that regard, when we enter a book into sale, we're not turning off the previews. So as soon as we enter it into a sale, the previews will be available. At some point, see, the only master list we have is consignor generated. It's very clumsy because a third of the issues are under the wrong title. So, for example,
Well, like,
okay, so More Fun is just fun comics.
Right.
Okay, so wherever they've
'cause they
had like,
didn't know when they
like-
made the list, all select is under select comics. And so it's something that we're still working on, but
yeah, and if it's a 4-color, it would be
under
screw it.
Donald Duck or
Well,
whatever.
there's a 4-color 108, which is Donald Duck. So it's Donald Duck 108.
Got it. Yeah, people keep asking about a master list, and that explains why there is not going to be.
There will be.
There will
one.
be at some point. And yeah, like Ed said, they can go and look in as we get them written up and described, they can go to our next auction and see the stuff as we load it in. And so they can see what's coming up as soon as we get the grades and we have them imaged.
Right. Many people have asked how to get a hold of this catalog. People who may not be on our mailing
So
list.
that can be ordered right off the website, I believe. Yeah,
Or I think if you emailed catalog at ha.com.
there's a link.
Email either one of
somewhere.
you and you'll hook them up. Email me at robertw@ha.com.
Yeah,
I'll take
yes,
care of
better
Yes,
idea.
yes.
Because I know they won't do it. So robertw@ha.com, and I will make sure that you get a catalog. You're welcome. You're welcome. If there are further questions, feel free to email them. A lot of people are asking about very specific books, and I'll let these guys handle that appropriately. But I'm incredibly excited. I
I'm
mean,
incredibly
this is
excited.
one of the reasons I came to Heritage a year ago, was to be around comic books. I did not know that one day I would get to sit at a table with these comic books. That's a hell of a thing.
And we do get busy, but what I have been doing, if somebody has specific questions, like somebody asked about the speed, I'll go look at the master list and, I'll answer if at all possible,
Yeah.
if at all possible. If it's something specific, is this book in here? What issue, what numbers do you have with this title?
We're happy to answer those questions.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate everybody joining us. If you have questions, ask these guys. I know we didn't get to all of them, but it's been an hour, and more than 100 people have been with us for the entire hour. So terrific turnout, and we are excited to see you at 11 p.m. Central on the 18th when the Promise Collection auction begins. But obviously on the 17th, that's when the comic and comic art auction begins. There's an action number 1, Batman, there's a Detective 27, and a lot of extraordinary pieces throughout those 3 days. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.